Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Harry Potter review series, and this time we're looking at the other handheld version of Sorcerer's Stone, this time on the Game Boy Advance. The Game Boy Color version turned Sorcerer's Stone into an RPG of sorts by including turn-based combat and stat-based equipment, even if the overall result wasn't the greatest. So what did the Game Boy Advance do to the gameplay? Well, in a very surprising twist, the Game Boy Advance version takes the gameplay from the PlayStation version, and in an even bigger twist, does a damn fine job of it. Story-wise, the game follows the plot devices used in the PlayStation game, as well as adding in some of the plot lines cut from both it and the film. But on the flip side, it strangely omits some sections to a certain degree. The narration sections uses stills ripped straight from the PlayStation game with the same dialogue, though this time it's delivered by Dumbledore. The Midnight Duel is reinserted like it was in the Game Boy Color version, but it's after this that where the game starts making odd choices in what to adapt and what to change. For example, in the book, the film, and the Game Boy Color versions, the part where Ron insults Hermione before Halloween is left intact. The PlayStation game slightly altered this to having the troll just randomly showing up, but here in the Game Boy Advance game, Hermione gets mad at Harry for using a spell she taught him because he used it to explore Hogwarts after dark. Side note here, after dealing with the troll, we get the scene where McGonagall is supposed to take points away from Hermione while giving some to Harry and Ron, but here she just flat out gives us the 50 points. So I guess that's nice. Harry never gets the invisibility cloak in this version, and thus he never uses it to sneak past the restriction section, which leads us to finding the Mirror of Erised. You still find the mirror as part of another side quest, but I found it odd that they took out the cloak. Hell, the Game Boy Color version had it. The final omitted plot device is Norbert. He's not even in this game at all, and so this game retcons this moment by having Snape catch Harry late at night and giving him detention with Hagrid. And while it still gets us to the same beat of the plot, it just seemed like a strange change to make. After that, the game follows the plot close enough regarding the traps protecting the stone, while the final scene is changed based on whether or not you gain enough house points to win the House Cup. But this time, Dumbledore just awards Harry 60 points, though the game still presents another funny line should that not be enough to win. Overall, it follows things close enough while making some weird changes to reach the same plot points. Also, it's worth noting that Quidditch is back in this version after being absent from the Game Boy Color, though like in the PlayStation version, Quirrell never tries jinxing Harry's broom. Like I mentioned, the game is remarkably like the PlayStation game in terms of design. You move around Hogwarts and select spells to interact with objects around the school and in challenge areas. You attend several classes like Defense Against the Dark Arts, Transfiguration, Charms, and Potions. Potions is just a cutscene, there's no mixing ingredients here, while the other classes have a defined structure. You begin each class by learning the spell by copying the pattern performed by the professor, like the Charms minigame from the Game Boy Color version. There are 3 patterns to master, and while you only need the first to gain the spell, you gain a ton of house points if you can master the other 2 levels. But like I said about this type of minigame from the Game Boy Color version, my mind cannot comprehend more than 4 motions at a time, and holy hell, some of these patterns just go on, and on, and on. So props if you can memorize them and get the extra house points. After you get the pattern down, you'll enter a challenge room to use the spell to solve puzzles and collect 6 stars to complete the challenge. These rooms are a lot of fun as the game gets you used to how you'll be using the spell, and once you have a few spells under your belt, it's fun to put them all together to make progress in these rooms. The spells you learn are Flipendo, which attacks enemies, in addition to hitting switches and blocks. There's Alamora, which unlocks certain locked doors and chests. Avifors, which turns rocks into birds and is mostly used to activate switches. Lumos, which illuminates dark rooms for a bit. And finally, Wingardium Leviosa, which has you lift objects and place them onto switches. You switch spells by hitting the shoulder button, but you can't cycle back the way you came, so if you miss the spell by accident, you'll be cycling through all over again. You can't cycle back using the other shoulder button, which would be the most natural thing to do, because it's assigned to the flute Hagrid gives you that you use like twice in the game, and I wouldn't have done that, but you know, not the worst setup ever, but a tad annoying. All the spells get used a lot, with the exception being Lumos, which honestly is the weakest spell of the bunch. The rooms to use Lumos in are not totally dark, so you can still see to a certain degree, but you still need to use Lumos to see the enemies and the objects. The annoying thing here is that the spell only lasts a couple of seconds before you have to cast it again, and that wouldn't be annoying if you didn't have to constantly keep switching back to find the spell and recast it. Now thankfully there's only a few rooms like that require Lumos before you'll never touch it again, which is fine by me. Making your way around in this version is easier because the pause screen has a map which not only tells you where Harry is, but where the objective is. You also get to take part in Quidditch matches, which work surprisingly well given the limitations of the system. The field is presented in an overhead bird's eye view in which a marker shows you where the snitch is at. You zoom around trying to get close, and once you get close enough, the snitch will then start shooting out blue rings for Harry to fly through to gain speed, filling a bar and allowing him to catch the snitch, which actually uses the same hand-grabby timer system from the PlayStation version. These work surprisingly well, and I was pleasantly surprised to also see that the PlayStation version of Quidditch was able to be replicated in such a way on a handheld. The other parts of the game have you sneaking past the prefix to avoid losing house points, as you traverse Hogwarts at night in some cases. There's a lot of these sections, and like I mentioned before, there's no invisibility cloak, so get ready to break out the Metal Gear Potter again, since you're definitely going to be hiding in small alcoves and behind pillars for a majority of them. Even without the cloak, the sections aren't too terrible, so as long as you take your time and hide behind objects every couple of steps, you'll do alright. At first I was moving too fast and kept getting caught because there was always a prefix just out of reach, so I started taking it slow and hiding a lot more, and this made it relatively painless during the later sections. Though of course I was wondering when the invisibility cloak was going to show and make these sections easier, but then I slowly realized that wasn't going to happen, and I felt a tad disappointed. Although I'm simply confused with this concept at this point. You have an object that makes you invisible, and it's part of the story, and yet the game developers just keep adding stealth without the cloak. It's like, why? The traps protecting the stone are a series of challenge rooms and minigames, which lines up close to how it worked in the PlayStation game. Fluffy has you running behind it playing the flute to put him to sleep. The Devil's Snare is a series of rooms in which Harry has to hit fires in order to burn pieces of the plant to free Ron and Hermione. The Wing Key section plays like a Quidditch match where the snitch is just replaced with the big key. Though you get hit by a ton of the other keys, which can make this drag on a bit. The chessboard scene, for now the fourth time, is not just you playing chess, but rather the pieces move around and you have to hit them with Pendo when they move onto a switch that's placed on the board. Finally, the potion mixing puzzle just has Harry traveling through 4 little mini rooms to obtain a potion that Hermione mixes together. And the final battle against Voldemort plays like a modified version of the fight from the PlayStation. The first form has you hiding behind 4 pillars and letting Voldemort's jinx hit the pillar to destroy them. After that, you gotta hit the Mirror of Erised to throw the spells back at Voldemort, again kinda what happened in the PlayStation finale. It's fun, and thankfully if you take damage, Voldemort throws rocks at you, and if you hit them, you can gain a health pickup. So up to this point, everything has been going great for this game. The plot follows things accurately for the majority, the gameplay has great use of puzzles and spellcasting and platforming. Unfortunately, there's a few snags that slightly, and I mean very slightly, bring down the experience. The first thing we have to talk about is the game's penalty system for dying. So if you thought the Game Boy Color was too lenient when you died, then you're going to find that the Game Boy Advance game is leaning so far in the other direction that it's halfway down the block. If Harry's health hits 0, you return to the start of the challenge section that you're currently in, which sounds like no big deal. The only small caveat here is that all of the puzzles that you solved and all the progress you made is reset as well. It's like if you were playing Zelda, and you made it 75% of the way through one of the dungeons, beat all the sub-bosses, opened up loads of treasure chests, and solved all the puzzles along the way, only for Link to get sniped by a bat in the ass at the last minute, and then be told to go back to the beginning of the dungeon with all the puzzles and monsters back in starting position. So yeah, even if you collected 5 of the things that you needed in your challenge section, fall down a pit, and all that stuff will go back to where it was sitting as if you had done nothing. This was the worst element about the game by far. Harry, for the most part, is always given a health pickup in most sections, but the issue comes from the platforming. In a few sections, Harry must maneuver over moving blocks, and if you fall off, it's back to the start, no questions asked. Thankfully, Harry moves slow enough that you'll be making moves with little fear, but honestly, after you realize that falling into pits means heading back to the beginning, you're going to clench your butt cheeks with every step you take onto one of these blocks. One section I gotta bring up also is when you collect worms and must bring them to Hermione and Hagrid. It's set up like the other challenge rooms where you collect 6 of them, but unlike the others, you can't just walk into them to obtain them. Instead, you gotta play Hagrid's flute and lure them back to Hermione. It sounds simple, but as I brought one each back, the bar at the bottom of the screen showing the worms never filled in. I tried talking to Hermione, I tried talking to Hagrid, and they said nothing, so I thought maybe I had to grab them all in order to trigger the next part. Even though that made little sense, and again, that's not how the other collectibles in the other challenge rooms have been working. I spent an extra hour in here looking all over thinking I had lost one of the worms, only to find that by sheer dumb luck, all you have to do is stand behind Hagrid and Hermione, use the flute, and lure them right into them. While the puzzles were simplistic to solve to get the worms, the fact that this part was so difficult to end the quest just drove me up the wall. The presentation is very appealing with smooth animations and very detailed areas. The character models are rendered with a bit of a 3D feel with easily distinguishable features. The areas around Hogwarts are, again, much like the Game Boy Color version, don't necessarily match what was seen in the movie, but this time it's much more uniform than the hodgepodge of design choices seen in the other version. There's a carpet lining the majority of the floors, and this leads directly to classrooms and to staircases, so you rarely find yourself getting lost, and if you do, it's easy to find your way around. The animations on the characters are also very nicely detailed, with Harry's running animation looking eerily similar like how Harry moved in the PlayStation version. The game uses created character portraits for most of the characters when they talk, with the only exceptions being Harry and Madame Hooch. Because art for Ron and Hermione looks like a custom job, while the Harry art looks exactly like they took a stock photo of Daniel Radcliffe and pixelated it. The music is again a mix of Jeremy Soul's work provided in the PlayStation version, while also providing a bunch of original tracks as you journey around the school. There's nothing in the new stuff that's iconic as the main theme, but it's all rather fitting, and each of the tracks complements the area that you're going to hear it in. Overall, I was incredibly surprised at the fun I had with this version of Sorcerer's Stone. After the disappointment I felt with the Game Boy Color version not capitalizing on its RPG mechanics, I was a tad nervous to how the Game Boy Advance version would handle it. The idea of taking the spellcasting, puzzle-solving, platforming of the PlayStation game and reformatting it to work on the handheld was a bold move, and honestly, it was a risk that paid off. I had a ton of fun moving from room to room and figuring out what spells to use and how to make progress. The game presents everything in a clear fashion, and again, aside from some slight confusion that can be caused from that worm side quest, I was never lost and never frustrated. The one thing that brings down this experience, and it's really the only sour spot I had in my time with it, was the checkpoint system. The fact that the game punishes you so harshly for a death or a misstep while platforming or dying can be aggravating at times, and it definitely induced the image of me trying to snap a Game Boy Advance in half if I wasn't playing on my emulator. I was fine with the game sending me back to the start if I fail, but like, why do you gotta take the collectibles away with all the progress I made? Again, these rooms are not huge and it'll usually take a couple of minutes to get back to where you were, but this cheap respawn system feels like they were trying to pad that game out a bit. I managed to beat the game in about 5 hours, and mind you, that was with a few deaths, so if there had been a checkpoint system, that time might have been cut in half. Again, aside from the one flaw with this checkpoint system, I really did enjoy my time with this version, and I would give this game another go in the future if I happen to be in the mood. So now that I've played all the console and handheld versions of Sorcerer's Stone, yes, I know the PC version is still out there, but I'm definitely not close to getting that version to work on my laptop, nor are they planning to officially re-release them, which honestly they should at this point. Regardless, I'm just going to rank them all from best to worst. For one, I gotta give it to the Xbox, PS2, or GameCube version, mostly because it plays so close to Chamber of Secrets, which is my favorite game in the whole series. The fully explorable Hogwarts, the spell challenge chambers, the Quidditch matches, the design, the music, it makes it an immersive experience. Number 2 is going to be the PlayStation version. While it might not be as expansive as the one in the next-gen games at this point, getting to explore Hogwarts in any capacity before the first film had released was a sight to behold. And while the PlayStation version plays around with spells and being used in weird minigame aspects, it's still a fun puzzle platforming game that creates a dark yet fantastic atmosphere that I loved to experience back in the day. Also, a bit of a side note here, if you have seen my original review of the Sorcerer's Stone game on PlayStation 1, you might think I was a tad hard on it, and you're probably right, since that was like my first video ever, because I probably geared my review into focusing only on the bad and not really giving the positive elements enough time in the light. I feel bad for that, and honestly, if I could redo that video again, I'd probably lean more towards I really like this game, but here's a few things that just sort of eke at me. Number 3 is going to the Game Boy Advance version, since it plays like a toned-down version of what was seen on the PlayStation. The challenge rooms are fun and easy to navigate through, spellcasting is more straightforward than the PlayStation version, but the checkpoint system is really what keeps this one from ranking any higher. Finally, in last place, and it's no real surprise, the Game Boy Color version, simply because it tries to be an RPG and it fails at being a good one in multiple ways. Even with the less refined graphics, if the RPG elements had been there and were more refined, I could have seen it competing alongside the Game Boy Advance version. The Game Boy Color game just felt like more of a chore to get through, and a majority of its gameplay mechanic was almost 90% useless by the end game. I played both of these games back to back, and after finishing the Game Boy Color version, I felt like I never wanted to boot it up again, while after finishing the Game Boy Advance version, I felt more like I could see giving that one another shot. I recommend playing the Xbox, PS2, GameCube, PlayStation, and Game Boy Advance versions. They all have great list of positives and are overall enjoyable experiences, and especially because nowadays you can pick these games up at bargain bin prices, you don't have to really worry about length and replay value. Play the Game Boy Color version only as a last resort, and if you're interested in seeing how the Harry Potter franchise would be handled as an RPG. I know that the Chamber of Secrets Game Boy Color version, along with the handheld version of Prisoner of Azkaban, are also RPGs, so I'm interested to see if the mechanics can be improved in those releases. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time when we look at Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets on the Game Boy Color. Thanks for watching.